Hi everybody, and welcome to this tutorial where we are going to draw a little path in the snowy landscape. And for this one I'm using the Canson Mi-Teintes 50% cotton, and I'm simply choosing a mid-gray version of it. But first I want to explain how I got to this composition. You can see this also on my Patreon page, so would you like to support me in making these awesome tutorials? Please join me on Patreon, or just check it out and you can support me and helping me make even better tutorials. Okay, what we see here is that I'm using a 1-point perspective. And depending on how big you draw your antler or deer, depends on how far it is away from you, but also all those disappearing lines will go towards that deer. You can see this live, of course, on Patreon. And what you can see that even the sky is working together, and the way that the path is going, and they're all going to one disappearing point. You can draw in a deer, of course, as a main subject, but otherwise you can draw in a fox or in whatever animal you want. And what I do first when I made this drawing is that I've taken my Panpastels, and if you don't have them you can just use your pastel pencils, of course, and then blur this out. But whatever material you are using, it is very important to first start out with the part of the sky in the far distance. You can see me using here a little bit of blue, some white, a little bit of yellow and soft pink, and blue for the top. This is that part, and you can see that I have already keep in mind that it is in 1-point perspective. And once you have put that sky in, you start out with the trees that are way in the back. And because you first drawn in the sky, you can easily put those trees over the sky part. Then I'm deciding where the forest path will be. So these are the sides of that path. And on the right, as you are getting closer and closer, the shadows will become darker. Underneath the trees, of course, there is a lot of shadow, even though this landscape will be a bit snowy and it's frosted down. It's the very early morning, and here the path itself will be lighted up because it has a little layer of snow, and way in the back I keep everything really blurry. I also put in a little bit of light blue for the reflection of the sky. That is a nice touch. And because I'm using here the Panpastel, it's all a bit painty. It looks painty and it's really blurry, which is exactly what I need for this composition. The Panpastel works really fast, and I quickly get the feel of where my shadows are and where the highlights are. But I do keep attention of that one-point perspective all the time. The trees in the front will go way up, so you can simply draw in the branches over the sky, and then you just continue by thinking of where is the light coming from. The sun is just rising, so way in the back it's really blurry, and once you have about the composition that you like, you can switch to your pastel pencils and then start very easily to put in more and more detail. Because it's a wintry landscape, I'm not using a lot of color, and also because it's very early in the morning and there's some fog going on and it's kind of misty. I'm using this mid-gray to put in my first detail. I also use it for the shadows underneath the trees, to make those trees stand out even more. Here you can see the branches that are going through the sky, and on the right side there are 3 trees standing out the most, and this one of course is the one nearest to us. So that tree will get the most detail. By putting on detail, and a lot of it, in the front and staying away from the background, just leave it as it is, you will get a very big perception of depth. And that is exactly what I'm trying to study here. This is just a quick sketch, and I am trying to teach myself to get as much as perspective as possible, as much 3D depth as possible. And this is a very, very good way to study this. On the right you can just see a little pine tree, and because it had been snowing in the night, just a little bit, I thought it would be nice to also put a little bit of snow on the trees in front. And first I do this with a light gray. Here, for instance, is a birch tree, and also there are branches that are frosted over with a little bit of frost on them. So I just simply put in some light lines. Also here on the pine tree on the right, which had catched a little bit of snow. And then I shift over to my white pastel pencil, and then I draw in the lightest edges on the snow. So I keep notice that I do not draw in that snow all white, but I'm using light gray and white together. I also use that white for the frosty branches, and that gives it a quite, well, realistic effect. And it's so nice to go over your Panpastel with the pastel pencils. Now, to get even more depth, I will draw in the front even darker. Here you can see the edges of the path, and I simply put a little bit of dark gray next to that. Then I take my white pastel pencil again and my darker gray pastel pencil. This way it is very, very easy to draw in some grasses that have died, and it is just giving that soft feel of a forest lane, and with all those little grasses just next to that lane. And I love the way that the pastel pencil goes over the Panpastel this way. Here in the front, I'm getting in extra detail, and I'm using here a bluish gray to make those trees even stand out more. It's a very cold color of gray, and it reminds me of a very early morning. Of course, you can try out some other colors, make more of these. Oh, and let me also remind you, you can see the real-time version of this drawing for your study purposes on my Patreon page, of course. This is my darkest gray, and that darkest gray I'm using for the shadows underneath the trees, and also for the tree that is closest to us and the second tree, because those two need to stand out more. And by drawing in that dark gray, you get even more depth in your drawing. I also draw it here in between the grasses that are in front of us, and I also do that on the left side. Here you get a nice feel of what I'm trying to do here. You can see the far distant, the disappearing point that's all the way blurry, while in front there are much more detail and much darker shadows. And that's exactly what I'm trying to study here. Well, this is the picture. I thought I would draw in just a little bit of a cloudy there. And now it's time for our main character. In this case, I'm drawing in a lovely deer. And it's just for trying out whether it would work or not. It's just a mere study. So I've shifted over to my graphite pencil, because the pastel pencil is a little bit too thick for that, and the deer's just tiny. But I just want to get the feel how it would look if I placed an animal in this nice landscape. So I'm drawing in the antlers, and I've chosen for his head to be exactly in the midst of that disappearing point. So this deer is kind of looking over his shoulder. He is just coming out of the woods, and I have captured him by surprise, and he is looking over his shoulder towards me, deciding whether to run or whether just to walk on. And that's the nice thing about drawing a quick study, is that you can just see what happens, and when I'm not happy with it, I just throw it aside and make it all over again, maybe try out some other colors. But this is about what it would look like if a deer was walking right through my landscape. His antlers would stand out rather dark, because he is standing in his own shadow and the light is coming from behind. So this is about the tone of, the tone that deer would have, I think. And maybe I'm not happy with it, I will just make another one and maybe work it out, and then making it bigger, and then drawing that deer all in. But this is the way I get the feel with developing, as you like, a landscape, and trying to figure out a composition that would make a great drawing. Should I make this a big one? Here I draw in some extra grasses. He's just coming from the woods, of course. And I think that would make a perfect nice study to work out later on. Well, I will leave it up to here, and I hope you will give this one a try. Hope for a big thumbs up. Don't forget to check out my Patreon, would you like to see the real-time tutorial. And I hope to see you again next Friday.